Hello, everyone. Mike Arnold here, co-founder of Pat Trading Partners, along with Bob Iacchino, here for your weekly ETF sector overview to help us position ourselves for the next week. So, just really macro pattern right here. I am starting to watch this week, especially with weekly cycles on the S&P still pinned to the top, near overbought. Daily cycles turning over, but rotating back up, but we could still see another rollover play in here. I'm watching for a topping pattern. We have CPI and PPI. Doesn't mean Monday or Tuesday have to be a topping pattern, but really quick, I am going to be watching for a breakdown, especially below the daily rotation zone. If you want to start watching for just a key static level, it's about 4,090 to 4,100. Then I'll be watching for the pullback. And this will be short-term bearish. Even though I'm very long-term macro bearish, we have a lot of stopping points, 4,020, and then major back at 3920. I can't get really overall bearish until at least we get a major close below that, and then preferably a major close below about 3841. Yes, that's a long drop, so I can sit micro bearish, I can sit minor bearish, but these are going to be pullbacks, and we have key support points. Why do I bring that up? Because then we could have a nice resumptive move higher, so we have to consider that with the stock sector overview. Let's get through the sectors now. XLE, still in long-term buy pattern. Crude, though, just triggered a long-term sell pattern. So do keep that in mind. So I am very minorly bullish still. We start getting a daily close below about 69.85. I'm then watching for a return to the lows in XLE. Cycles are at the bottom on the daily and close to the top of weekly, so we might see one more final bounce, and I'm expecting a short-term bounce in crude. A short-term bounce move in crude, but since crude has triggered a major sell signal, rallies, even strong rallies, can be sold once we get reversal patterns. So that's going to be the same potentially with the XLE. So I have to be very picky with energy plays. Very picky with energy plays. Now, there could be some good energy stocks that are great on pullbacks, and that just doesn't mean you buy energy. You have to actually look in the energy sector at the key plays and, from my perspective, get a little more pickier, even though we're still in long-term buy mode. XLRE still in long-term sell mode. We've rallied back. Key thing I'm watching, if we do rotate back up, daily cycles at the bottom, weekly cycles at the top. So we might get one more pop up, but then I'll be watching for a topping pattern and a potential gap fill. So pretty much mixed signals, and giving the long-term trend, I can't get overly bullish just yet after this extended run. We might see another little push higher, but then I'm starting to watch for a more substantial pullback move. Break below Friday's lows, then I'm targeting the gap fill. A break below there, then the major support area is all the way back at this 42 breakout area, and then I'll start looking to see how attractive real estate is. Now, if we get that little push higher with daily cycles at the bottom, I'll be watching for a significant topping pattern up around 44 to 44.50. So I'm being very patient with real estate at the moment because we're in long-term sell. XLF, inside week, essentially this last week, was it officially? Not officially. I mean, missed by 3 cents, but nearly an inside week. Really a consolidation week. We still have this longer-term doubles. So we still have a short-term bullish move within a long-term bearish sell pattern. What takes financials off the table in the short term for me is if we trigger this key little topping pattern. This key topping pattern right here. Let me see if I can zoom in here. I got to adjust some of these settings. They got reset when I was recording the Futures Ed podcast with Jim Iorio. So what will I be watching? This potential double top. This is, if I can get the levels, by the way, that podcast will be dropping sometime on Monday. So please watch for that if you are interested in some of my longer term thoughts. So I am watching for this. If this triggers on a close below 33.02, hands off with this pullback in the short term on financials, especially since it's a long-term macro sell. If this doesn't trigger and we do pull back and then break back above about this 33.80, then we're still within the short-term bullish pattern within a longer-term bearish pattern. So I will still target higher prices, and financials are still in play. So as long as this little double does not trigger, I will consider still financial plays to the upside. XLK technology. Technology has now shifted into a longer term back to a buy mode here. So as long as this doesn't trigger back to sell mode, I will look for technology plays after a pullback. I need a pullback. What I don't want to see is really a break back below right around 139.25 on a closing basis, because that would take it below this rotation zone and probably tip us back in a long-term sell with a whipsaw. Now, cycles at the top on the daily, cycles at the top on the weekly. So I'm watching for this pullback and then a resumption of an up move, at least for the short term. Would not be surprised to see XLK return to this 150 to 151 to 152 area. And longer term, would not be surprised to see another push higher still in the overall broad market after this pullback, as long as this pullback does not close below some of those key levels I listed at the beginning of this video. So XLK is definitely, but it's not just buy technology across the board. Stuff that's strong, especially after earnings, and remains strong even on a pullback, can still be something like, also you have plays like that. Sorry, made a typo. You have something like Apple. So again, watching for a pullback, but within that pullback, we still have another target for a double bottom. So we could easily get the pullback, even a gap fill, and then another rotation back up in Apple. So those are the kinds of things I will be watching for longer term that still have a longer term play in. XLI is right at the verge of tipping back into bullish mode, but did not tip it back into it with this week. Also completed this double bottom. So we've been bullish for this week, triggered it back in the middle of July, and we've got 2 follow-through weeks which are taking us back to the verge of a longer-term buy signal, but nothing yet. Nothing yet. And why I'm not being aggressive in this is we also have a potential little topping pattern. So I would rather wait for another rollover play, especially with cycles at the top, and then watch for industrial plays again. Especially we get below 94.48, 93.60, 93.09, and 92.71 take us back into a rotation zone. And because this is on the verge of possibly tipping into a buy, I'm more of a neutral level, even with this pullback. Now, if we trigger this pullback and then we collapse lower, I'll stay in longer-term bearish mode. But XLIs, I will watch for that those plays on a pullback. XLI, I will watch for those plays. XLY, which is consumer discretionary, still in long-term sell, bouncing all the way back to a key area, but not tipping back into buy mode. Watching for starting to a bigger pullback. My key line in the sand here. I'm not going to chase this consumer discretionary without seeing a pullback in this, especially with daily cycles at the top, weekly cycles at the top. Again, up against that 50-week exponential, watching for a pullback play to reassess on discretionary because we're still in long-term sell mode. Now, if we hold about this mid-156 levels and then start rotating up, especially if I get a percent beat buy, I will watch for some consumer discretionary plays again. But even if we push up Monday, Tuesday, I'm not going to chase this higher. I'm going to wait for that pullback move and then go into watching for more plays in that. XLP consumer staples, confirming this major double bottom, not triggering on the weekly, in buy mode on the weekly still, or on the larger term, but triggering this double on the daily. So on any move up plays, especially with consumer staples, if we start getting the pullback and then another rotation back up, we could actually see consumer staples getting into a more buy mode. We have daily cycles at the bottom. Weekly cycles are at the top. That's the only thing that makes me a little cautious, but we have this long-term we're in long-term buy mode based off the long-term system. And we also have a major bottoming pattern. Again, what would get me to get back into bearish mode? We'd have to get all the way back down below 71 on a closing basis. We're a long way off, so I'm watching for plays in consumer staples, especially things that are a little more value oriented or at least to put in a nice pullback formation. So that's a sector I really would begin to focus on from my perspective. XLV, still healthcare long-term buy. Short-term daily cycles at the bottom rotating up. Weekly cycles at the top and rotating down. So mixed messages in this. As long as we hold about 128, I'll watch for pullbacks and then a resumption of trend back up. Other than that, in order for me to get really bullish, I need to get back above 134 because we have mismatched cycles. So it's sort of long-term buy, but at a pause, watching for this next little pullback. And then as long as this keeps holding up above this 128, we'll be more aggressive targeting healthcare again. XLB, still long-term sell. Nice little week, but not much follow through in this last week with an inside bar. XLB daily cycles getting to the bottom, and this are the material sector, but weekly cycles getting towards the top. So anywhere in here, I'm watching for another rollover play to reassess. So at this point, not really chasing anything unless it can get a really strong move back above 78. I would rather see cycles realign and then start looking for material select plays, especially since we're in long-term sell mode. XLC, and you can see here, long-term sell. XLC has not been able to get much traction. This, again, it's looking on any bounces for rollover plays. So when the market comes weak, first thing I'm looking for is weak communication stocks that are going down with the market. Other than that, what would tip me? Cycles getting to the top on the daily and the weekly into the weekly rotation zone. So there's nothing from the bullish perspective that's really interesting me. Would rather, there's some companies that are stronger like a T-Mobile, but would rather look for those, again, re-entries on pullbacks. Things like secured puts or after pullbacks, covered calls, should this sector remain stagnant. So that's the kind of things I would watch for, but overall, nothing to really go chase after in XLC. XLU, again, we're back to long-term buy. We've been in there. Short-term, weekly cycles at the top, daily cycles rolling over. We're getting that pullback in the 10-year notes. We do have a little potential double top here. So I'm very patient in XLU, going to watch how this pullback moves. And until we start getting a very strong rotation back up in notes, not looking for plays in this to see how we gauge. So I want I want a rotation back up in the notes, which would mean yields start dropping again. And as long as this doesn't trigger this little double top, which is a close below 72.63. We get the close below there. It's hands off until we've completed some of these double targets and the possible gap fill. The double targets are 71.50, 71.02, 70.48 areas. And that would still keep us in long-term buy mode. So please keep that in mind. Just cleaning up some of the charts. Xrt Retail Etf still in long-term sell. Nice little bounce back play here. But nothing here. Watching with this little, we got key resistance up here with the 200 overhead. I'm not really looking at anything with the 4-hour cycles at the top, daily cycles at the top, and weekly cycles at the top into the weekly rotation zone. So I'm watching this for a pullback. And if we start getting below 63.40, we'll start watching for more bearish plays in there. If we can hold above mid 64s and rotate back up. I'll be very picky with retail plays over the next few weeks, but very picky with them. IYT, transportation, still in long-term sell. We had that medium-term buy, I'll call it a medium-term buy off that double, which completed. So where does that put us now? It's in with cycles at the top on the daily, cycles at the top on the weekly. I'm not chasing anything transportation-wise. I am watching for a pullback play and then another potential rotation back up because we are in long-term sell. So I'm going to gauge how this pulls back. The key area I'm watching right now is right around the major area I'm going to watch is about 231 to hold on a closing basis. If we did drop below there, I'd go back to 227, but below 227, not touching it. So these are the areas I'm watching for a pullback and then rotation backs up to see if there's any interested transportation plays. If we don't get those, then I'd rather miss out on something than chase this higher at this point. DBC commodities, still barely hanging on to long-term buy mode, barely hanging on. And we're now at a triple bottom. Did not confirm this. It was a confirmed but not triggered double bottom that turned into a triple bottom now. Pretty much, if there's anything commodity related on a very short term, meaning a short-term bounce, because oil we could get a short-term bounce, I'm interested in. But unless we start getting back above 26.35 on a closing basis, I'm not touching commodities basis close as we are to tipping into a potential sell mode. This now really has to prove itself before I'm aggressively going after commodity plays, especially with oil tipping into long-term sell. Now, again, I will stress, we could see some bounce plays in commodity. Now, things a subset of that like gold and silver, I'm more bullish on. Other macro energy, I'm more bearish on, except for uranium. All right, so that's where we sit with that. DBA, long-term sell shifting back at the end of June. Short-term, nothing. I'll get a little more interested above 2055, but that's very specific plays. Otherwise, we're in consolidation. So not really going after anything. Agriculture as a subset of commodities. Semiconductors, still in long-term sell, coming back to this key area. We've had the massive 5-week rally. I'm watching for a rollover play, especially with divergences. So lower high RSI, higher high in here, still in a macro consolidation, still in long-term sell. Cycles at the top at the daily, cycles at the top at the weekly. I am not chasing anything semi-related, semiconductor-related. Watching for a pullback. All right, so this is hands off. If already in stuff, aggressively raising stops. Gold miners watching for a bottoming play. We'll start watching with gold. If gold, we get some more move up this week with a key close. We start getting key close back above 27, 27.20. Then I'll start looking for some gold miner plays. There's a lot of gold miners that are really undervalued, so there could be some short-term plays in there. That's something, if you're interested in some gold plays, could be an interesting area to investigate. We are still in long-term sell, but we're watching for a bounce pattern in this, especially with weekly cycles at the bot still turning up. Now, keep in mind your major overhead resistance is still 29.40. So these are short-term bounce plays that could develop into more should it can get some traction in the gold market. Value. Vanguard Value ETF triggering this weekly double bottom. Still in sell mode, but mixed signals because we got that weekly double bottom. We'll still look for value plays, especially if we pull back in the short term, where I don't want to see a really major close below 135. But as long as we... minor would be 135. Major, I should say, would be about 133.37. Keep in mind to invalidate this double, we need to get all the way back. We haven't hit the stop reduction yet. We need to get all the way back on a closing basis below 130.46. But in the short term, if we really start breaking down below that 133.50, 133.30 area, not interested in chasing any plays until I see a rotation back up. But overall, I'm watching for value to kick back in and this to trigger a longer term buy after this next pullback. Cycles are getting to the bottom on the daily, but at the top on the weekly. So I need to get this weekly back to the bottom, and then I will get much more aggressive. Growth, finishing the double bottom within a long-term sell. So we got a trigger a couple weeks ago so we could play growth, and you've seen a pretty good follow through with growth. Growth at the top and pinned there at the top and rolling out of overbought. So growth not touching at all right now. It'll just be trail a stop. Key minor pullback level is about 249. Major is about 244.50 for pullbacks. Close below 244.50, not interested at all, but I need this to reset the cycles before really looking for growth plays again. That's where we sit on the sector overview. Hope this helps people navigate the next week in the sectors. And remember, CPI and PPI, things are backloaded Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week. So do keep that in mind going into stuff, especially with major cycles at the top in the broad market. With that, I will talk to everyone later. Bye for now.